Your inner critic can keep you safe, but sometimes just a party kill. Your idea is worth it. It's worth your time and your exploration. We empower women and we transform communities. The empowerment is simply holding a mirror up to who they are and just letting them see themselves as the powerhouse leaders that they have always been. A little bit like Dorothy's ruby slippers. They have the power all along. We give them a viable path to really magnify that power. Women who are members would say, oh, you must be so proud. Then I say, and you too. I didn't do it by myself. Every single member who joined made that number possible. When any of us has that idea, that moment of something that they think they should be doing, don't.
Welcome to The Edge of Possible, the podcast dedicated to helping you achieve extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cameron Atlas, and together, let's unlock your edge. There can be times where we trick ourselves into believing that to make a real impact in this world, we need an unlimited amount of resources or a lifetime of experience. But my guest today proves that the only thing standing between you and a global movement might just be a notebook and having the courage to ignore that voice in your head that says, who am I to do this? I think the more important question here is, who are you not to? I'm sitting down with Wendy Steele today. She is the visionary founder of Impact 100, a global movement that has disrupted traditional philanthropy. Wendy realized that the old systems of giving were leaving people on the sidelines, specifically women. So she designed a new model. And what started as a simple idea that she sketched out on a family vacation has now grown into a worldwide collective that has granted over $178 million to local nonprofits. Wendy is a Wall Street Journal bestselling author, a 2024 USA Today Woman of the Year, and was named by Forbes as one of the 50 women over 50 changing the world. In this episode, we break down the exact process that Wendy used to take her idea in a notebook to a scalable global movement, how she pushed past her own imposter syndrome, and the incredible story of how she navigated launching her organization in the shadow of a national crisis. If you have ever felt like you have more to give, a bigger impact to make, but just don't know where to start, this episode is your blueprint. Let's dive in. Here is my conversation with the incredible Wendy Steele. Wendy, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you too, Cameron.
I really love our conversations, and so I've been really looking forward to this one. We've known each other for about 10 years or so now, and I feel honored to call you a friend, and just seeing the work and the impact that you've made in the world. For those listening who don't know the work of Impact 100, what is it and how does it help?
Well, first of all, I feel the same way. It's a gift to be here with you. Impact 100 is a collective giving movement that I started back in 2001. It's a very simple and powerful concept. In a local community, you gather at least 100 women. They each donate $1,000. They pool all of that money together and offer it right back to the local community in grants of $100,000 or more. So every increment of 100 women, we're able to give away another grant. What started in 2001 in Cincinnati has now grown to 4 countries and collective grant making of more than $178 million. Wow. All people like you and I who are giving $1,000 a year.
Did you ever imagine that it would be and create this kind of impact? That's a lot of money that's being given away.
It is astounding, honestly. And it far exceeded my expectations. You know, I didn't grow up in Cincinnati. I was a transplant there. And Cincinnati is one of those places that they really appreciate, those multi-generational families. Also, you know, I was a banker. I didn't have the kind of pedigree that a founder might have. And so my expectation was that I was building something really specific for that community based on the women I'd met there. Turned out I was wrong, but that's what I thought.
So you had no idea of, like, no intention of making it outside of Cincinnati then? It was purely going to be a local thing.
Yeah.
Wow. How do you go from being a banker to, like, did you come up, was it this idea you had in the shower, for example, or was it something that you had for a long period of time, something that you wanted to make from an impact standpoint?
You know, I was very lucky to grow up in a family that instilled in me from the time as long as I can remember that I had the ability to make the world a better place, that each of us had the responsibility and the ability to do something significant, to leave the world better than you found it. And people do that in all kinds of ways. And so I think learning that so young, I spent my life, I went in to become a banker because bankers help people. And for my 20 plus year career, that's exactly what I did. But alongside that, I was volunteering in all kinds of places, and I was interested in the work of nonprofits, and I lived in different places. So I'd moved from Cincinnati from the East Coast, and when I would get involved in the community, no matter where I lived, I would invite my women friends to come join me, help on this committee or serve on this nonprofit board or help to make the world better in the ways that I saw. And for a long time, I was baffled why so many women told me no. And being a banker, I thought it was a math problem. Like I thought that whatever I was doing, they either couldn't afford to leave a child with a sitter and come out and do the work with me, or maybe they financially couldn't write a check or volunteer in that way. And it was only after moving to Cincinnati where I thought it's not a math problem, it's a structural problem. And that's really what started it all, is that our philanthropy for women had never evolved, but yet our roles had. Almost every traditional philanthropic or volunteer civic engagement geared toward women are all about time. You've got to work several hours to be counted as a member of some of those organizations. And that one size fits all, it doesn't really fit women that I knew. They needed something they could customize.
So the things that you were aiming to get them to come out and participate in was time based. And on this other hand, is it being financial based? Is that actually being able to donate and give money towards something great? Is that what you mean by a structural challenge that was there?
Yeah, I would
Mm,
say this, that traditional philanthropy, if you have $500, $700, $1,000, and you make a donation to your favorite large nonprofit, that you'll get a note, you'll get a thank you,
yeah.
but you don't really know where it goes. Now, I understand the value of that. And so that structure isn't what's wrong. But when I talk to women, they said things like, oh, I gave once to my university, or I gave once to, the big art museum. And I never really knew what happened to the money. I didn't know if it was spent, if it mattered, if it made a difference. They didn't think that they knew enough to make a decision about where to give, that they had enough money to make a difference, or if they didn't have a path to figure out how they could get involved. Whether they traveled for work, they were a stay-at-home mom, they were caring for an elderly parent. None of traditional philanthropy seemed to fit the flexible schedules. Women kind of have seasons where they have time and talent and treasure to give, but sometimes they can only write a check and sometimes they can do something else. And so the idea of Impact 100 was very intentional. I selected $1,000. So, first of all, it's 25 years ago this year that this concept,
Congratulations.
that I created that concept. Thank you. $1,000 is what I call a stop and think gift. Whether you are really wealthy or you've got a budget for it, most people, if you ask me for 500 and I can afford to give it to you, I'll give it to you and it doesn't stick. But I believe we, all donors, need to be connected to their gift because when they're a part of Impact 100, their $1,000 gift turns into $100,000 grant. And so if they're connected to their $1,000 with that stop and think, they will be equally connected to the outcome. Now they get to design their own experience. So if all they can do is write the check, and by the way, lots of women don't just write one check, they pay over time, right? They budget for it. But as long as by our cutoff they've paid that $1,000, they don't have to do another thing and they will vote in the end. It is fully democratized philanthropy. But if they choose to get involved, they can serve on a grant review committee. And there is no better way to learn about the local community than to start reading the aspirations, the big dreams that local nonprofit superheroes are trying to do in their community. Now, when you imagine 50% of the women who join an Impact 100 chapter have never written a check for $1,000 to a single charity prior to joining. Believe it or not, that was me. I had never written a check for $1,000, but I thought I could, and I thought it would be fun and worthwhile. And so we find 50% of the women who are like that, and I refer them to them as newly minted philanthropists. They may have given other places, but this was their first sort of big step. We also have women who are so well resourced, they can personally write $100,000 checks to the charities they care about. But they choose to be a part of Impact 100 as part of their portfolio because of the connection to other women, the direct connection to the community, and the ability to really see all aspects of the nonprofits where you live, work, and play that are trying to solve the most pressing problems. And when you get sort of on one side, the seasoned philanthropist, her view from the mountaintop, she knows what's happening everywhere. She knows what best practices are. She knows what other organizations are doing, and she knows what works. Your newly minted philanthropist, sort of on the other end of the spectrum, in her case, she may know which bus line it has to be on in order to be effective, or which community partner has to be invited in. And when you imagine every shade of experience in between, the conversations around the grant review table are robust, and we make better decisions because we have this broad range of women from all walks of life who live in the same area and are looking to fund solutions in their own backyards.
So are there moments that they get to have? Is it simply that committee that meets and has conversation around specifically the grant that goes out or the grants that go out? Or are there times when the women are able to come together and have conversation and meet, and, is there a social aspect to it? How does it work?
There is a social aspect to it, but it's all very mission focused.
Yep.
And so if women choose to get involved on a grant review team, what happens is Impact 100 is women funding community, not necessarily women funding women and girls. We certainly fund those kinds of organizations sometimes, but our focus is serving the community. So grant review teams are around each one of our grant funding areas. So we have arts and culture, environment, recreation, and preservation, family, education, and health and wellness. Those 5 categories are designed so that there wouldn't be a nonprofit in the local community whose mission wouldn't qualify. And so women can choose to serve on a grant review team, and they'll look at all the applications within that specific focus area. They will ultimately pare it down. They will go out and make site visits and ultimately name one finalist in each one of those. Each committee will make one finalist, so we end up with 5 at the end. And when that happens, all of the members, whether you've been involved or not, will get an executive summary. They can hear directly from the nonprofit about how they would spend the money if, in fact, they were awarded one of our grants. And everyone votes. So it's one woman, one donation, one vote. That's the minimum. beyond that, we have lots of different ways. We might have a visit to a past grant recipient to hear directly from them how our money changed lives and what happened as a result of the funding. We also meet with other women who tell them sort of, why did I join Impact 100? What was it for me that made me join? And because everyone is included, we end up having friendships and connections that you never would before because, back to the sort of newly minted and seasoned philanthropists, they don't live in the same neighborhoods or shop at the same stores. They often don't have kids or grandkids who attend the same schools. And so we create this pathway that sort of takes our differences and puts them aside. And it is based on our common goal, which is to leave the world a better place and to fund the most promising solutions to our community's most pressing problems. And that kind of a unifier is like glue.
Mm. What have been some of the experiences that people who join, so we'll get to the impact that's actually been made to some of those not-for-profits in a moment. What have been some of the things that have been shared?
Oh my gosh. That's probably the best part of what I do is to be able to talk to members from around the footprint. It's so common for women to say that they met their best friends, that they learned about the community more than they ever knew. Sometimes it's because they found their pet nonprofit. Now they joined Impact to learn about the community because they were maybe a generalist or because they didn't know the community's needs. And now, once they start learning about the nonprofits doing this incredible work, they suddenly realize that what they really should be doing is going and volunteering there or serving there in some other way. And so, Impact 100 really, for those members, we say that we empower women and we transform communities. And so, women feel empowered in the sense that they have agency. They often will become leaders or advocates. Their view of themselves gets so much bigger. And I often describe that empowerment because I think that can be, a tricky word. But often the empowerment is simply holding a mirror up to who they are and just letting them see themselves as the powerhouse leaders that they have always been. A little bit like Dorothy's ruby slippers in The Wizard of Oz. They have the power all along. We give them a viable path to really magnify that power. And it can be a game changer for almost anyone. It's hard to go through the Impact 100 experience and not feel transformed.
I think there's so many things to love about the work that you're doing and how this is, again, gone across the world in multiple different countries. You mentioned about empowered. And I think it's an important word and a powerful word because I don't know, when like within our lives, if you don't feel empowered, life can be really, really tough. And it can feel like you haven't got a way out. It can feel like you're struggling in that way. And life's tough enough as it is. And I think it's one thing to feel empowered. It's another to feel empowered and actually see the result of something that you've actually been a part of or that you've created or that you've built, because that's some kind of impact that's been made external to you, like outside of yourself, and something that lives on past, your own self or how it is that you're feeling at a certain time. So I think it's important to feel empowered. And I think there's just something really magical about like being able to witness the results that it's generated. To share a little about what have been some of those results with, and man, the $100 million, was it 150 million or something like that? Nearly. That's a lot of cash.
That's a lot of
What's been
cash.
some of the money? What's been some of the impact that's been made?
I'll answer quickly about what empowerment looks like, a little bit more succinctly. I think we all know that there are lots of problems in the world and there are lots of conflicts. And so whether you're watching local news, hearing about your own backyard, or any of the bigger world views. The problem for a lot of women, and I'm sure a lot of men, is that when you hear the news, it's hard not to feel scared, hopeless, discouraged. And it's very difficult. These problems are complex. They don't have easy solutions. But when we sit and we hear, read the news, see the news, and we wring our hands and we worry, that just gives the problems too much space in your head.
Yeah.
And when we can show women how to pivot and look for the solutions, because the solutions are already there, the solutions are in those local nonprofits, that their entire cadence changes. I've had husbands come up and say, my wife's an entirely different person. I have had women say that, they finally realized that this was their purpose. And in all, the thread is we're linking arms because we understand that we're better together and that everyone has an equal voice in the table to determine what happens next and where that funding goes. And then when those grants get made, then the real transformation happens.
But what I love about that is I remember hearing this years ago that we're much more alike than we are different. And news publications and even social media now and other platforms would show that that's not the case. And yet, when you're able to sit down and have a conversation with someone, when you're able to bond over a common goal or a common objective, a common mission, a common purpose, magic
Mhm.
happens. And you realize
Exactly.
that there will always be challenges in the world, and it's not diminishing those in any way, shape, or form. And there is so much good in the world being done. There is so much being put towards solving the challenges that we're facing. And as you mentioned, if we can guide some of the attention that we have, that again, if we're not conscious and intentional about where we guide that attention, it can become a really scary place in the world of thinking that it's doomsday and everything is bad, when you can look outside of that and find, again, some of the amazing things that I'm sure you get to witness of the people that apply for the grants and the impact that's being made in the local communities, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that we all do it together. We're all acknowledging that there's all kinds of things that aren't going well, and we're uniting in, if you will get more of what you pay attention to, right? And so if you're looking for solutions, you'll find more solutions. And unfortunately, if you get sucked into the bad news, because I don't think people intentionally look for bad news, but once you get sucked in, it gets dark fast and you don't really see how to turn away, and if you turn away, to what. And that's really what we try to do, is we give them a different path that is lit with opportunity and generosity and kindness and collaboration, which is specifically kind of how women normally are in the world. Generally speaking, women are very collaborative and supportive, and we look for solutions. And so it was designed with that in mind.
Mm. Yeah, I remember a number of years ago. So I have this inside this performance tracker that I have this, what I call a wellness checklist. And there's all of these different things that are in there. There's like 25 items or so. And, you got your basics like drinking water and eating healthy food and me playing on the piano, going for a walk, these kinds of things, working out. And there was just this one time a number of years ago, and there's division happening on different news sites. And I didn't know, because I looked through my wellness checklist at the time. I go, I'm doing all this stuff and I'm still feeling really depleted and really anxious and really uneasy about the world and about myself, and feeling exhausted in that way. And then I realized, yeah, I was spending too much time, and I got sucked into that loop of bad news. And as soon as I released myself from that, I remember walking out the door. I haven't thought about this specific part for ages. I remember walking out the door and I'm just walking down going, it's okay. It's like the world's like, it's okay. And just that switch, that was what was depleting my energy. And so
Yeah.
this can fuel your energy. And there is such strength in, from an energy standpoint, in having a sense of purpose. And what you've built again is extraordinary. I have a question about going to when you came up with the idea. So you mentioned a bit about that earlier in the show so far. Was it like the idea, okay, I'm going to get 100 people and they're going to donate $100,000 each, and it's going to be $100,000, like to give people who are maybe contemplating an idea, whether it's a good idea, whether it's worth pursuing. There's so many things that people hold back from pursuing for different reasons. And I just want to understand, how did you come up specifically with that idea in the first place?
Well, believe it or not, I had taken my children on vacation to northern Michigan. I was obviously living in Cincinnati at that time. And, do you ever have something in the back of your mind that you just can't really get out of your head? It just keeps sort of showing up when you're not thinking about it, and then it kind of shows up. That's how it was that summer. That summer of 2001, I just kept having this thought that there was something that I needed to do to help engage women in philanthropy and community service. And I got out a spiral notebook and I started to write down all of the reasons that women told me they were not involved. And as I wrote them one by one by one, I went, like, I guess any good salesperson went, to overcome each one of the barriers, of the obstacles in the way. It's not denying that the barriers exist. It's understanding that they do, and then working around them so that women, regardless of their circumstances, of, all the other competing forces for their attention and their finances, that they could actually do it. And so as I was writing, and what's really shocking to me, honestly, is that the Impact 100 model that we have today, 25 years later, is the exact model that I designed in that spiral notebook. Because it turns out that one of the elements of the model is that women can design their own experience. I alluded to it a little earlier. They can decide if they want to have any kind of service, but they are not required to. And it's interesting, a few years ago, there was a study on what, millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, what kind of community, like what kind of philanthropy they're interested in. And to no surprise, they want the kind of philanthropy that they can come into when it fits their lives and leave if it doesn't, which is how Impact 100 was designed. Now, I was not thinking about those generations back then. I was thinking about the women I knew who, frankly, faced all the same circumstances, but millennials, I just think, are better for advocating themselves than some of the prior generations. And so what started in that notebook was there. Now, I didn't feel qualified to be a founder. Certainly not a founder of a nonprofit like this. It also felt so obvious to me that from my vacation, I called a couple of women in Cincinnati that I really respected, and women who had long-term pedigrees in perhaps nonprofit work, also might be multi-generational families in Cincinnati, and some other skills that I didn't have. And I explained the concept and I said, you know, it's simple. It must exist somewhere. And if it does, I think I know a lot of women who would want to be involved. And if it doesn't, would you want to work alongside me to bring it? And so the story often gets told by the news media that I gathered a bunch of my friends. And I didn't. I really didn't gather a bunch of my friends. I gathered smart women who knew things I didn't know and who I knew either by reputation or mere acquaintance. And in one particular case, a woman that I called to invite to the founding board, she said she was unable to do it because she was making a commitment to a different organization as a leader. And she recommended another woman. I had never met the other woman. I called her on the phone. I told her about it. She said she was in, and she was in, because the last thing I wanted was to surround myself with a bunch of my close friends who would just nod and say yes to any crazy idea I had. I needed women who knew things I didn't know and who would respectfully push back when something I was talking about didn't make sense, because I had no ego in that. Like I really wanted to just do the best thing.
So let's go back to the notebook for a moment. And you're on vacation with your family. First up, how long had the idea been going on in the back of your mind? Do you have an idea about that?
I'd say at least about 18 months, little
Yeah.
elements of it.
This is really important, I think, because I just had a thought just then. This was March 2016, I think. And I was flying back from America at the time. I was still living in Australia at the time. And I remember looking out the window and just thinking, I had stuff back at home. Other people would be better off with it than I would, because I was traveling so much. And I had no idea at the time that that was the start of something. And it had been starting previous to that, but that one in particular, because what was it, about 8 months later, I sold everything that I owned, went on this crazy journey around the world, and just the most incredible things happened as a result of that. And we know each other like largely like from throughout that process. And I guess I'm wondering then, how did you go about deciding that, okay, this is the time to actually write this down? Was it just so persistent, or how did that work when it was 18 months and then all of a sudden you go, okay, let's go?
It probably wasn't a straight line over 18 months, but I believe that part of the magic of why I was ready then is that I was on vacation. And I feel like in the work, in the noise, and in my case, I had three little kids and I worked full time as a banker. And so the noise and the demands and all the things that you have to do just in your normal work daily life, when you have a life like that, it doesn't give a lot of extra space to be creative. And one thing I've learned, and probably, although I haven't really thought about it this way, but probably it was instilled in me from that summer, is that if I really want to be creative, if I really want to sort of be in touch with my better brain, it is usually either outside or somewhere with a view. I loved how you said you walked out one day and you were like, it's okay. And I think when we get out in this magnificent world that we live in, whether you have a faith perspective or not, it's like you look at the oceans and the mountains and the flowers and you look at what's out there, canopy of stars at night. It's hard to feel no sense of creativity, no sense of awe. And so I believe probably simply being on vacation and not having all the constraints of work, because back in 2001, although we had email, I was a banker, so I didn't have access to like the bank system, because that would not be good for a random banker who's on vacation to be able to access that. And so I really was unplugged. And where I was is a place that I have loved my whole life, because I grew up spending summers there and I was up there for a summer vacation with my kids. And my parents were close by, my dad and my stepmother. And I think the time was right. And I often meet people who talk about, I keep thinking about this business idea, or I keep thinking about this other thing. It's like you gotta still the noise and listen to it full on. And then you can make a decision of whether it's brilliant, it's not, it's for you, it's not for you, what you need to do to make it better, Or sometimes just putting it down on paper is enough for you to really look at it objectively and say, this one might not be the one. Maybe there's some other idea that I should be doing. But I feel like if you're meant to do it, your brain won't let you forget it.
It's so good. I think of this term of that silence speaks to us, but only if we're quiet enough to listen, to hear it.
Yes. Yeah.
And that has proven to me time and time again. And whether you believe it from a faith point of view or that it's your brain just sending, information down because it's gathered whatever it is, or any spectrum in between of what your belief systems are, the amount of times, because I'll often ask this in a keynote that I'm delivering and say, where do your best ideas come from? Every time it's either going for a walk, it's out in nature somewhere, like you said, somewhere with a beautiful view, it's in the shower, it's on the toilet, it's all these different places, right? That's away from the busyness of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, as you were sharing, I wonder if we're going to be impacted in a way that is maybe a little negative, our ability to come up with novel ideas and be creative if we're constantly being bombarded with things and things taking our attention and us not actually dedicating time and space to just being still and allowing us to be. And what do you think?
I think that is a brilliant question. And I think that there's a real risk. I can tell you personally, and you know this over all the years you've known me, on any given day, my to-do list is longer than I could possibly do it. And that is true day after day after day. And so I spent a lot of my nonprofit career working 7 hours a day, sometimes not getting paid at all, sometimes barely getting paid, but the work was always there. And I won't give the brand name, but I used to have a watch that was tied to my phone. And although I know that I could shut off the announcements and I could make it quiet, I finally gave it away because although I could do all those things, I have always had this heightened sense of responsibility. And so whether it was the weekend and evening, whether I was doing something else, if my watch was buzzing or my phone was pinging, I was always looking at it. I was always seeing what do I need to do? And often it was not, there's this dopamine hit that happens when you check something off your to-do list. But the problem is that when you don't have a list, you have other people's urgencies and other people's items that I think it's easy to get sucked into this sense of overwhelm. I think there's a lot of other mental health issues, anxiety, depression, and I'm not a mental health specialist, but I can tell you that it is in being still that your brain gets to take a break. And I think it's all correlated. I really do.
Well, the studies are showing from a mental health standpoint, those things are getting worse, right? They're not getting better from a depression, anxiety, loneliness, like social isolation. Each of these things are getting more challenging as technology is meant to be making our life easier. And I'm a massive believer in technology, utilize it. And it's allowed me to have the life that I have and to go from, growing up on a farm in the middle of outback Australia to where it is, where everything is now. I'm massively appreciative of it. We've got to be so intentional about how we go about utilizing this though, because there is going to continue to be more and more options for where your attention goes, and designing your time and your attention to go in the direction that is ideal for you, where the technology becomes a magnifier. You utilize it to get a different outcome versus the technology utilizing you to get the outcome that it is wanting from you, right? And so when you were sharing about, other people's demands and things like that, I think of it as, if you don't fill your calendar, someone else will.
Yeah.
And especially if you're in a leadership position or you own a company, for example, or for a not-for-profit, whatever the thing is that, or even just a family, right? If you don't consciously create your calendar, somebody else will fill that. And one of the things that I think has come out from this conversation so far is dedicate time in your calendar for space. And whether it is the time, like going on vacation with family or having some tech and time free time. I'm a massive advocate for that, of having both tech free time, but actually like don't know what time it is either. And,
Right.
it's just such a beautiful space to go, what is it that I feel like doing? Right. And so dedicating that time, because even if you're just there with your own thoughts and you're writing down on some paper or brainstorming, at the very least, you're going to be helping to recover and recharge from an energy standpoint and replenish your your resources to be able to be the best version of yourself in the next thing that you need to get done, rather than burning out, because burnout is increasing as well. It's been shown, and that makes perfect sense as well. So dedicating that time, and I'm a massive believer, like get that into your calendar, like specific times that you're going to go away, do these things, and get them in there early before people
Yes.
have an opportunity to do it. Like Brittany and I, my wife and I, we're just planning. She's hosting a retreat in July, and I'll be going there and getting to experience all of it there. And yeah, there's a number of days, and that's okay. The time of this, we're a number of months away from that, and planning that out and making sure that it's in the calendar. We literally spoke about it an hour before this podcast, so it's fresh in my mind right now. And we planned out, okay, when are the flights going to happen? What time? When are we going to be? And it's going to be amazing. I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, dedicating time into there, and yeah, I think it's so important. And I love that you took the time and had the time with your notebook versus it being distracted by something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's funny. I love that you had just come from that because earlier today I had a conversation. So I'm lucky enough to have a team of two amazing women that I work with, and we're all fully remote. And I've got one just kind of near Napa, California. I've got one in Atlanta. And then I split my time between Florida, where I am now, and northern Michigan. And literally prior to the holiday weekend, I had said to the team, we need to reimagine our calendars because one thing that you're excellent at, Cameron, that I am not, and that is your physical fitness routine. And so you are always always doing the right things for your physical health, your mental health in terms of being committed to exercise. And let's just say that I'm the opposite end of the spectrum. And I think my colleagues also are enough like me where work comes first and this is a priority, and we kind of put our own personal things on the back burner. And we had the big conversation that we can't do that anymore. I believe the structure of our organization virtually, we are so strong because of some of the rituals we do, both in our meetings and in our ability to get together in person several times a year. And when we do those things, it it strengthens. And I said, you know, I believe we are best in class in terms of remote workforce and how we do what we do. And I also believe we need to be best in class in how we care for each other. And so the challenge was the entire team, myself included, had to identify where we would schedule our fitness, our whether it's going to a gym or playing pickleball or taking a walk or whatever the case may be, going paddleboarding, that we would identify those times and protect the calendar first. And then we can build our internal meetings and external meetings around those things. And so I love that y'all just had the conversation with your July plan, because I am a believer as you are. If it's not in the calendar, it doesn't happen. And we have to hold each other accountable.
Yeah, you can have the best intentions about getting something done, and if it's not in your calendar, it's not, it's unlikely it's going to happen. It's not that you didn't intend on doing it; it's that you just forgot because there's got like this whole myriad of things that have to get done. And
Yeah.
I love that there's an accountability that you're building into that, because I think it is incredibly important to honor what it is that you need to be able to perform at your best. Last year, I had I think it was a downhill slope that occurred for me because I got very burnt out last year. There was just a ton of travel, and I look back at some of the things that were happening. I was working an incredible amount of hours, just crazy hours, and I look at I do track my sleep with an Aura ring, and
Yeah, me too.
I love it, and it is last year was 30 minutes less sleep than I'm getting so far this year. So far this year, it's 30 minutes more. And that, and I'll give you like exact numbers. 6 hours and 45 minutes was last year average overall. And it's about, 7 hours and 15 minutes right now. I find that's about that 7 hours, 15 is really good for me. Everybody's different, right? People talk
Right.
about, okay, 8 hours. Some people need 6, some people need 7, but some people need 9, right? And it depends on how much you're expending from an energy standpoint as well. From a physical fitness point of view, I find that amount is usually good. A little bit more would be a little bit better. But I find that's maybe the minimum that I'm needing. And knowing that just the sleep alone, let alone the other pieces. And I think about it in terms of capacity within my own wellness. The more capacity that I have, the more I'm able to impact, the more I'm able to share, the more I'm able to be there for other people. And if we get that the other way around, yeah, you can do it for a period of time and you can probably do it incredibly well. And for many people listening, you've probably done it incredibly well, probably over the course of many years of people needing things from you. And if we can go inside out rather than outside in this case, inside out is you take care of yourself, you build your capacity, and that becomes a sustainable fuel for impact to occur versus it being a limited resource, which is going to happen at some stage. We're not superhuman, all right? At some stage, there is going to be something that will occur in terms of your health and well-being that's going to be not that great. And so the more that we can look after ourselves, and I love that you're doing that from an accountability standpoint, because that increases the likelihood that you're going to stick to it. And I'd say as well, treating that time as sacred, treating that time as this is as important as a meeting. This is as important as a meeting with our best potential, maybe it's a donor about to come in and it's going to be amazing. And we've got to treat ourselves with the same level of respect.
Yeah. I love how you say that inside out, because I think the world demands our attention, that the outside trying to get in is a loud, persistent voice. And the inside has, I think, been trained by our overachieving nature to be a little whisper. And I think I love that. It just makes really good sense to me when you talk about, yep, it's time to flip it to be from the inside out instead of the other way around.
Mm. Well, I have a few. No, I made a few notes as you were sharing some of these pieces before about how you come up with the idea. Let's lay out these steps, and I'll share them, and then feel free to jump in and say, no, it wasn't quite like that, because I think it's really important. It's great to have a structure for how to think about coming up with an idea, but not only coming up with an idea, but bringing it to life like you have. Otherwise, just the sheer amount of potential that is just sitting there dormant right now blows my mind, right? Just imagine how many ideas people have across the world
Right.
that they're just keeping silent right now, that could have helped solve a real challenge, a real problem in the world. So what I wrote down was, first and foremost, give yourself the space and the time to dream, to come up with ideas, to contemplate, to reflect, to just be there without having to have the answers or anything like that. Second is that listening to the ideas and actually then getting a notebook, writing it down or typing it out, however you're going to do it, but get it down onto paper so that you can actually see it. So it's out of your head and onto paper. The next one I heard was that there were problems that you had seen that were going to get in the way of this becoming something great, potentially. And so you wrote those down. These are the problems that each of the women have mentioned that they have. Okay. Then it was about, okay, well, how do I go about overcoming those? And so it was methodical in that. Fill me in from there. Did you then have a time where you were thinking about, okay, what could I do to solve that? Or was it just the idea that came immediately, 100 and 1,000?
Yeah. When I got the notebook out, I knew I was writing the solution. Like that's what
Yep.
I sat down to do. And so I would say you've got the steps very well. The next one is probably me calling people that I respected,
Yep.
because people will, and it's, you're so right when you think about how many people who are listening and watching this today probably have that, a good percentage have that little voice in the back of their heads with an idea that they might not be, they're allowing their inner critic to keep it quiet. And so I do, you know, the next thing I did, because now it was on paper and now it looked like it was going to work. It was really simple, but powerful. And that's when I brought in people who had different perspectives
Right.
to
So
really
with
kind
that,
of tell me. Yeah.
yeah, with that. So before we jump into that step, did you have the idea for like the actual thing that hasn't changed in 25 years, 100 people, 100 women donate $1,000. Did you have that idea already, right, coming in and going, you know what, I've got the solution and I've already, that over the 18 months, that was when the idea came? Or did it come when you saw the problems and you thought, okay, how am I going to overcome that? When specifically did you come up with the idea specifically?
So I would say over the years, all these conversations kept repeating in my head. And because of that, I kept, I am a problem solver, sort of by nature. And so, it kept going around. It's like, yeah, but that can't be where it ends. Like, no, there has to be a way around it. And so by the time I sat down with a notebook, I didn't know how it would all happen. And it didn't go in one sitting. I didn't sit down and start writing and have it all. I sat down, I wrote a couple things, I thought about it, and then I did, played with kids, did what I did a couple hours later, a couple days later, until over the course of several days, then I really had what we now know as the Impact 100 model. So it was fully baked in that notebook that summer. It just didn't all happen at the same time. It happened
Yep.
over the course of a couple of days.
Yeah. And that it's often what will happen. I mean, maybe some people have, just the idea just comes out of nowhere and it's like there and it doesn't change, but it does. It usually evolves over time. And one of the ways that I'll often share within sessions, within keynotes of this term of strategically guiding your curiosity, right? And strategically guiding your curiosity on its own can be quite irresponsible, would be a good way of putting it, or silly
Yeah.
or careless potentially, because you could be curious and do some real damage. But if you're strategically guiding your curiosity in the direction and you get out a specific criteria in place first and foremost, which for you, it was, okay, you were starting to build this criteria. I would say the curious period happened over the course of an 18-month process, if you will, of slowly but surely piecing these things together. And in that moment, and you share with me if this is on or off, there was what could I do to solve it? Not what am I going to do? Because the moment that you need to have it solved, that what am I going to do? That trips so many people up. Because what am I going to do is me needing to know the answer before there's any form of clarity there whatsoever. Go in with absolute curiosity about what could I do to solve this? Okay, there's a problem over here. Okay, I have this, there's a bit of an idea in the back of my mind, but I don't really know where that's coming from. And okay, these are the problems that the women have shared. I know that there's got to be a way, right? So there's a belief that there's got to be a way. And then they're slowly but surely piecing it together till a point where it then becomes, okay, I've got these different ways that it could go. Now I look at that. I look at the problems that I had. I look at how I could overcome that. And hang on a minute, like that 100 and 1,000. Oh man, that makes so much sense. How on is that with the process, even though you weren't, consciously
Yeah.
thinking about that the whole time? Was that fair?
Yeah. Very fair.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I would say that's where it was. That's where it landed. And part of it was recognizing what traditional philanthropy looks like. So part of the reason for the $100,000 grant is that it's a big, powerful numbers. And there is, the economics major and banker in me knows that numbers have power. And when you get something like $100,000, it really does move the needle. But it also speaks to back when I said, if you make a gift of $1,000 to an organization and you don't really know what happens, but if you make a gift of $100,000, you do know what happens, and you can actually do a whole thing. You can do a whole program, or you can do in a whole vehicle. You can do a whole room. You can do a lot. And it was getting the satisfaction that I only imagine people who are so well resourced, they can give hundreds of $1,000s and millions of dollars away, because they get to see the beginning, the middle, and the end of whatever it is they're funding, which is awesome. And we get to share that. When I talk about those numbers within Impact 100, that cumulatively we've given away by the end of last year more than $178 million. Women who are members would say, "Oh, you must be so proud. You must be humbled." And I say, "And you too." Because unless every single member, I didn't do it by myself. Every single member who joined made that number possible. And I want our members, if they were there for a year, took a few years off, came back and rejoined, whatever their story is, their participation is what made those gigantic numbers possible. And I don't ever want them to lose that connection, because it's their power that did that.
Yeah, it's reconnecting them to that sense of purpose and why they got into it in the first place, and how massive it's become. So the other couple of steps there. So we've got so far, give yourself the space and the time, allow yourself the time to ideate and listen to that voice, whatever that voice is saying, and just write stuff down, see what happens. Make sure you have the notebook, understand what the problems are, understand how you're going to overcome that, get curious about what you could do to solve that. Once the idea then starts to form, you mentioned that you didn't feel qualified. So let's say that everybody listening, just know that that's going to come at some stage, right? If you're dreaming up something that's big, there's probably going to come a time where you go, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm going to, imposter syndrome could kick in, whatever the experience is for you. Then you did something really, really clever. I love it. You went and talked to people that you respected. And it wasn't necessarily the people that were closest to you. It could have been, if there was a level of respect that was there, but it was also people you specifically and strategically targeted, the people that you respected, that had an appropriate view, because many of us will have people that are supportive in our networks, in our families, our friendships, and they see us in a certain light. They see us in a certain way based on decades of experiences. And you then come up with this zinger of an idea and they go, what are you talking about, right? Are you crazy? Right? Well-meaning people might not quite understand. And so, yes, you can go to certain people within the current sphere that you have, the close network that you have, and finding those people that can really challenge your thinking, can really support you if they see some good in it, can get behind it. And these were, as you mentioned, smart people that knew things that you didn't. And I'd say as well, to get out of your own head, because you said you didn't feel qualified, because if you just stayed in your own head and gone, okay, I'm just going to go for it on my own, and you didn't reach out to those people, my hunch would be you might have given up.
Right.
Because if the I'm not qualified is just constantly going, and you don't have any positive reinforcement of this is actually a really good idea, keep going. because early on, you don't necessarily have the wins on the board. Right? You don't necessarily have the ability to go, oh yeah, this is actually working, right? And so to have that, and then the following for that was then the relationships, the network. You mentioned about someone who couldn't come on board, and then they said, oh, how about this person? And that, by the sounds of it, is how so much of this has grown across the world, is through relationships. How are we doing with the steps?
You're spot on. You're spot
Yeah.
on. I will tell you, the only family member I talked about it with was my dad. And I was very much a daddy's girl. He and I had an amazing relationship. He's one of the smartest people I've ever known. And so when I told him, the whole thing,
Yeah.
he's great at asking hard questions. And the thing is that the questions that he asked me, that actually my ability to answer them solidified that this was a good idea. Now, his questions were all about, were ultimately the kind of end of the story of how Impact 100 works, is that you have 5 finalists, but in year 1, we had 123 women. And so one nonprofit's going to go away with all the money and the other 4 will get nothing. And my dad didn't like that. My dad was like, well, your members, a certain percent are going to have voted for a nonprofit that doesn't get funding. And he was concerned about that. And I was able to fully articulate why it worked. Now, that was 2001. My dad passed in 2013. He literally spent every year apologizing to me for doubting it and for asking the hard questions. And in all honesty, to me, he wasn't being a naysayer, but sometimes the people who challenge you, it gives you your own confirmation, right?
Yeah.
When the right person, again, someone you love, someone you respect, I mean, if you're going to share it with someone, you've got to be open to the feedback and the questions. And I don't know that my dad ever got in his head that every conversation I had with him helped make Impact stronger. It was never a detriment. I would imagine for a lot of people, sometimes it is the people closest to you who might question or challenge. And I think as long as you can hold their opinions, understanding, the joke we say in my family is that when you're back together with family, everybody reverts to their most awkward middle school self. Because inevitably, like, those are the times, right, that as a family, we say that about our own kids, but even with my sisters and I, it's like we kind of fall back into the weirdness of all living under the same roof. And so, yeah, I think depending on who you talk to, that the negative or the questions or the probes or the disbelief can help you solidify in your own mind that
Yeah.
you're on the right path.
It's really good. What I heard with the way that your dad went about this, there was a genuine desire to understand versus aiming to ask questions to prove that you're wrong.
Right. Oh, yeah. He was not that guy. So, yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right.
Because I think that's happening more and more, that people are going into candid conversations with someone they might disagree with the view of, I'm going to ask questions or say things for the purpose of being able to position myself to be right, versus like a genuine curiosity about how is it that this person sees the world, and a genuine desire to understand. I think there can be a lot more understanding of our differences in that way as well. And then those of you listening, if it's on the other end of the spectrum with that, and there's naysayers that full well that if you bring this up, there's going to be some naysaying. You've got to ask yourself, are you ready for the answer? Are you ready to hold the space for somebody to say, hey, that's a terrible idea. What are you thinking? That's not going to work. Are you ready for that? If not, go find a space where the ideas can be appropriately challenged and questions can be asked to understand. And that could be a group. It could be, again, people that you respect reaching out to people that you don't even know is absolutely an option. They're only a message away. And so once you've got that in place, and you had that in place, Wendy, the idea forms. You start that throughout the the first years, even, throughout the 25 years, were there times when you thought you were crazy and what have you done, and, where the doubt crept back in, or has it been smooth sailing?
That's such a good question. I would say that the one of the key events that happened was, I had been on vacation with the kids, and the plan was some of the women that I had spoken with were going to be on the founding board. And so when I got back from vacation, get the kids in school, and then we were going to meet and we were going to see what we were going to do. Well, 9/11 happened
Mm,
and everything changed in a way for all Americans. Um, and it suddenly, as a nation, we had the wind knocked out of us. And personally, as a parent and someone who's active in the community and all the things, I mean, no one saw it coming, and it was brutal. And so we really kind of all took a beat. And then about mid-October, the voice in my head started to say, if not now, when? And if not you, who? And so I called that founding board together to a dinner, and they knew that this was going to be a go or a no go. I had 15 people I'd identified for my founding board, and I didn't tell them this, but in my head, unless 10 of them were ready to go, I would not move forward. It's to your point of going it alone. And so we all met for dinner. We didn't have a name at that point, all through the summer, it didn't have a name. It was just a thing. And it was at that dinner that we chose Impact 100.
wow.
And every single person said yes. And
Wow.
so, I think we all felt like so many people have felt in recent years, now more than ever, these nonprofits have big jobs to do, and they need this funding. And so I would say that was the pivotal moment. Impact 100 as a model, I have not had any doubts about that. It has proven itself in locations that vary, in populations that vary, with a variety of leaders. All of the factors at this point have been played. And I never really had any doubts about that. That seems to just stay. What happened, though, is that after Cincinnati made its first grant, which was in 2000, let me get this right, 2002. So I had the idea in '01. We had our nonprofit status by March of '02. 123 women joined by May. We got over 100 applications, and we voted to award our first grant in September. People magazine read that article, the Midwest Deputy Bureau Chief, and called my home phone, or
Wow.
perhaps emailed my AOL email address. So this is a long time ago. And ultimately, People Magazine did a story, and it was that story that launched the growth of Impact 100. And I was shocked that that's what happened. Like, that was not my expectation at all. And yet that's what happened. So the model didn't change. I would say when I look back on what I might have done differently or wish I would have done differently, is my goal was twofold. It was to provide significant funding to the nonprofits that are solving the most pressing problems in our local communities. And it was to empower more women, to bring more women into philanthropy and civic engagement. That's why I did what I did. However, hindsight being 2020, had I built a structure back then, post People Magazine, where the chapters paid something to what we now call Impact 100 Global, should I have built something like that in so that it would be a self-sustaining thing? Maybe. But since I didn't, and the way that the structure is built, Global relies fully on philanthropy. We don't have members who donate. We don't have those things. And so when I look back to what I have changed, not for the model, or maybe for global, but I also think like it's sometimes, all the things that we go through in our life, when you look back and you say, maybe I could have or should have done something differently. But there's so many lessons and so much that's happened because of the way that it has gone that I kind of hold that very loosely because I'm not convinced, even knowing what I know now, that I would have changed an awful lot.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, who knows?
Yeah. Well, I think the model as well, there's something really beautiful about all of the funds in that specific area going towards that. And if you're able to continue to build the model from a donor standpoint when it comes to the global office, and that everything gets taken care of there, so that then everything that is in the local areas can go to the local
Ex-
not-for-profits.
right,
There's something really,
exactly.
really beautiful about that, I think.
Yeah, that's the design. That
Yeah.
is the design. And it works. It
Yeah.
works. It keeps growing.
Well, I think it's just crazy that, again, the magazine, People Magazine, reached out, did an article, and all of a sudden it was, off to the races in a way. And that's the beautiful thing, isn't it? That we can't possibly know exactly how things are going to play out.
Hmm.
We don't know whether it's going to work out.
Right.
All we can do is put our best foot forward, continue solving the challenges that come up, overcoming them, working through them, continue to be resilient along the way. And if there is that continued belief, which sounds like it never wavered, which is fantastic. It never wavered as to you knowing and believing in the model itself and the impact that can be made. You never know what's around the corner. And
Yeah.
it makes me think about, there is this image of, I think it's this guy, like it's a little cartoon that I remember, and it's the digging through the rock with
Yeah.
the axe, I think it is, a little pick. And the guy is so close to the massive amount of diamonds, and then
Exactly.
turns back around,
Right.
and gives up. And you never know what's around the corner. And I think that's where having people around you that support you, that challenge you, that encourage you to grow, to continue going, because it's the same as anything. There's going to be pain that you're going to go through. There's going to be challenge. There's going to be setbacks. All of these things will come up. There's going to be doubt that might creep in. And the ability to be able to become that next version of yourself through that and continue on.
Yeah.
There's some amazing things that are possible, which is beautiful. One question I've got, you mentioned earlier in the episode about leaving the world. I think the wording was like leaving the world better than when you found it. Was that the right
Yeah.
wording from when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Where did that
Yeah.
get instilled? Because it's such a great one to learn early on. Like where was that instilled, and how did that show up for you?
So it was simply something that was an assumption. It's interesting because I cannot remember specific conversations, yet I know that was in my heart what I was supposed to do. Now, the way that my parents would describe it is, for example, if I were to go and babysit for the neighbor kids, they would say, now they're paying you, I don't know, I probably made $1 for the day or what have you. It wasn't anything big. They're paying you and they're going out, they're getting a break. Your job one is to take care of those children, keep them safe and fed and whatnot. However, when the kids are sleeping, when the kids are playing contentedly, go the extra mile, wipe down the kitchen counter. Maybe if there are dishes in the sink, wash them, dry them, put them away. Put the kids' toys back in the toy box. When you go the extra mile, you are leaving the world better than you found it. And for me, little, very young Wendy, I really leaned in hard to this idea that I had the power to make the world better. And so we did things like we would trick or treat for UNICEF. I don't know if you had that in Australia, But
Definitely not on the
Eunice,
farm.
yeah, not probably not a lot of that.
We come back with like maybe one piece of candy in a 5 mile radius. That's about it. So.
Hope it was a really big one though, and none of the little small ones.
Yeah.
There were these little cardboard boxes that kind of look like what a Happy Meal comes in from McDonald's or Burger King or what have you. And on the outside, it showed all of these diverse faces, and it told you that there were children who did not have access to food and proper medicine. And as a young person, the idea that those kids that I could see on this box didn't have food or medicine, like that was highly disturbing to me. And I remember trick or treating for UNICEF and almost getting teared up. Most of the time I got candy along with the donation, but to me it was like the house was on. Do you know that there are kids who don't have access to food and medicine? And so it was very moving to me. However, at home, you know, how you leave a world better than you found it might be cleaning up a mess you didn't make, or brushing. We had a giant Great Pyrenees dog with long white hair, brushing the dog or cleaning up the yard after the dog or what have you. Much of what I was doing, with the exception of the UNICEF, I was doing things that made me feel better. So I got very excited when I could do something. And not that long after, our mother died really unexpectedly. And our family suddenly, when we were used to helping other people, we were getting help. And this group of moms who barely knew our mother, may not have known her at all, may not have ever met her in some cases, but if they met her, they didn't know her well. They were first showing up the way women do, with casseroles and offering to do carpool shifts. But it changed. This group of moms, without emails and calendars and meal trains and all the structure that people often talk about when something like this happens, they just showed up. And they did it right after our mom died, but they kept showing up. All of a sudden, being on the receiving end, these moms would do things before we even knew we needed them. One of the moms called my dad and told him that it was okay if I went to this party that my friends were going to go to, because they knew the parents and they knew, it was appropriately chaperoned or what have you. But they would also tell him, don't let her go to this one, because this one, we don't know the people, and, we're not letting our daughter go. So you also should not. One of those moms, though, who will remain my favorite, she took me shopping. I had my first formal dance ever in my life, like actual formal dance with a date and a long, full length formal, and the boys were in tuxedos. And this mom took me shopping for that dress. And she took me to the actual mall to go and pick out the dress. Now, that's a big deal for me, because at that point, most of my clothes came from Sears, because that was my dad's favorite store. They had everything you needed and at an affordable price.
Yep.
Needless to say, I was not a fashion plate. And so this sweet mom convinced my dad to allow her to take me and go and do this shopping. And it was incredible. I ended up getting a beautiful dress, and I ended up feeling like I fit into this first boy girl dance. What so many of these women did is, like, PhD level giving. And my giving, I realized, was focused on giving what I could give, what I wanted to give, what was fun for me to give or available or easy, so that I would feel good that I was a helper and that I was doing something right. What these women taught me is strategic philanthropy. That it's not about giving what's convenient or what you want to give or you like to give. It's really understanding the needs and then doing that. And it changed my life. It changed the trajectory, certainly, of my giving. And, you know, was the idea of Impact 100 somewhere embedded in the way this community of women came around me? I don't know, but it doesn't feel that far fetched.
Yeah.
It certainly set me on my path from that time period forward, that sharing generosity as the most powerful lever we have to change the world, to make the world a better place, and understanding that we can all do this and that we must all do this in order for the world truly to become a better place. It changed how I give. It informed our, although not technically, but as an overarching value, that we need to give grants that are not influenced by what we think the solutions are, but why the people who are in the community, who know the details. We've got to listen and assess whether we believe what they're doing is a promising solution and then fund that. And don't try to morph them into something that we'd like them to be. And that's been a huge through line through everything I've done personally, but also what every chapter does when we look at a grant application is understanding that the nonprofits know what they know. And we just have to decide if we're aligned with their solution and we
Yeah.
think it's the most promising.
Such incredible lessons in there to learn at that age, through a I can only imagine a challenging time. Earlier on, it seems like there was like two big lessons that were learned in there. There was the earlier on one, which is just that simple desire to leave the world better than
Hmm.
than you found it, and the example that you gave of, okay, if you're going around a babysit, for example, going the extra mile, like as I was hearing you share that, I was like, every single parent and anybody who interacts and has anything to do with teachers, otherwise, if you could instill that, just that, oh my
Right.
gosh, right? Oh my gosh. And there was a beautiful experience that you got to have early on of, it feels good to give. It feels good to give. And I'd say that the lesson that maybe came later on, maybe came in that moment, but maybe came later on as well. It feels good to give when there's nothing coming back to you.
Right.
And that is, like I said, that next level of that experience of seeing a need of what something is that somebody needs in a moment and being there fully of service. And I think this comes back around as well to capacity. What we spoke about earlier, like if you're, again, treating yourself with love and respect over and over again, it provides the ability, the space, the capacity to be able to give in the most needed moments for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we have to understand that giving is a flow of energy. And it's interesting because a lot of people that I meet who are very generous givers are terrible receivers. And
Space is good.
so, the reciprocal, now I was young and very, very wounded, broken, by what had happened in my life. So I didn't have I didn't have the mental capacity or a choice to say, "Oh no, don't help us in this way." It also didn't feel uncomfortable at all when someone came to help me the way I think it can with some people. But what I learned much later is this notion that sometimes the most generous people are the people who are the most depleted because they don't have relationships that give to them. Their relationships are all mentoring and coaching and helping and serving. But unless they open that pathway for that generosity to be reciprocated, they're not operating on a full tank.
Mhm.
It's to your point.
This is a really important piece of the conversation here. About 12 years ago, 11, 12 years ago, I made a decision and I didn't tell anybody at the time. This is specifically on the business side of things of how I was going to build things going forward, how I was going to build relationships. And I made a decision in this room with a bunch of other people. It seemed like so many people were focused on short-term gains as to what they were going to get from getting opportunities and delivering that. I made a decision that moment to focus on, I'm going to give freely without expectation, knowing I'm going to get taken care of in some way, shape, or form. Right. And it was a focus on, while people were focused on getting up, these opportunities for the next 90 days, for example, or a year, I'm going to build relationships that are going to last me for the next 10 to 50 years. I think we've just crossed over the 10-year marks, right?
I
So
think
we've
so
got,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
how many left to go? I love it. And that was the approach. The key there of knowing that I'm going to get taken care of in some way, shape, or form is an important one, because as you were sharing, one of the things that can often happen is if we're okay with giving, but we're not okay with receiving, often what is happening is that you're giving in order to know that you're enough.
Mm.
And if you don't give, then there is I'm not good enough, or I'm not loved, or I don't belong, or I'm not this. If you're experiencing this, those of you listening, and you really struggle to even accept a compliment, let alone something that is much grander than that, this is something for you to dig down into and understand the relationship that you have with yourself, the relationship that you have with giving, the relationship that you have with receiving, because there is a beautiful balance that naturally occurs. If you look at anything in nature, it's exactly how it occurs. If it's too much or it's not enough, for example, if a plant gets too much water, it dies. If a plant doesn't get enough water, it dies. If it gives and receives in a beautiful balance, the nature thrives. It's where you go into a rainforest and you see everything thriving. Everything is giving and taking at exactly the same time. There are both of those things going on. And so finding that way to be able to naturally, like, the giving part is so incredibly beautiful and important, and the receiving part is as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you said so many things in that little comment there, because there are a couple of things. I have worked with certain business people over my life, and the key to for something to be defined as generosity, authentic generosity, is giving with no expectation of getting something in return. Sometimes in business, people will give hoping that they will get. And, they might go and volunteer at the soup kitchen because the CEO or the CFO of an organization that they admire and that they hope to work for one day volunteers there. Well, that is not authentic generosity. That is much more like a transaction. And you're simply paying for it with your time, but your expectation is you're going to get something in return. True generosity, however, we are biologically wired to give. And so when we talked, we've been talking about wellness kind of interspersed through our conversation today. But when we give authentically, and it can be time, talent, treasure, hold the door open for someone to walk in front of you, is as simple as it can be. Our body produces oxytocin, and oxytocin is the trust and love hormone. When you have a baby, you get a flood of oxytocin and you forget the pain and you bond with that little tiny human. When you shake hands, when you hug, those things will also give you oxytocin. It increases your trust in other people. And in that oxytocin, what we find is that people who are generous in any way, and to be clear, you do not have to be super wealthy to be generous. Most all of my life, I have not I'm not what anyone would consider well resourced. And so what I give from the heart, but it's not a big amount. But when you give, you get all these benefits. So if you are still working, you're more creative, you're better at problem solving, and you're more ethical because those are things that oxytocin does. But here's the really powerful thing. Oxytocin cannot coexist with cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. And so, which is why when you're super stressed, you're not feeling very generous. But likewise, when you're generous, you cannot feel a lot of stress. And so, sometimes when you're stuck in traffic and someone cuts you off and you can be mad and it can ruin your whole day. You can feel the rest of your drive or the rest of your day. You're like tense because that person made you late or didn't treat you the way you wanted to be treated. You go to the grocery store, you've got 3 items, you get in the 10 items or less aisle, and someone's got 27 items, and you could just silently fume. Those don't serve you well. Instead, you can turn it around because we all have the power in our brain to do that. And I call it making scenarios. So if someone's
Mm.
being a crummy driver, I realize that they must have their dog in the back seat that desperately needs to go to the vet and that they're distracted to try to get that dog safety. I imagine the person in front of me in line at the grocery store only has a short amount of time because, as part of this sandwich generation, they're caring for their little kids. They're caring for themselves and any partner they may have, and they're caring for their aging parents. And so maybe the window of time is so small that if that person didn't go in this line, which was empty when they got there, they wouldn't make it back. Generosity assumes positive intent. And generosity, the more you are generous, the more your body craves it. So the more you do it, the more you'll want to do it. And it becomes like that spiral shell, this Fibonacci sequence that never ends, because that's what we're biologically wired to do. And when you know that, and now you know how simple it is to turn generosity into something that is authentic and honest, but also is very intentional. You build habits and pathways through your brain and your heart that will become your default, and you'll watch your stress go down.
Mm. There's so much wisdom in that. And that scenarios piece is so incredibly valuable. And because you never know what somebody else is going through. And we are assuming, if you're going to assume something, might as well assume something good. Right?
Right.
It's better for everybody. And I'm still learning this. I literally came back from the gym this morning, great session at the gym. And I came and this vehicle, as I was going fairly fast, this person on the side of the road, in a striped vehicle, pulled out, and in that moment, I'm like, "What are you?" But I've noticed, and it's something that I'm continuing to work on for my own self, of just that moment of, okay, when something occurs, to my response of what has occurred, and aiming to get that shorter and shorter with exactly what you just shared of playing out the scenario that I've made it out to be a scenario in my head that I have no idea if it actually exists. And in that moment, I remember because I spoke to myself out loud. It's super fresh. It's literally like 2.5 hours ago. And I went around, and before I would, almost, I don't get like super, super angry. I used to get pretty angry, pretty frustrated, pretty angry with things. Now it's more like I'm there and then I'm on with it. But this time, before I actually then called out, going, what do you do? And then I pause and I go, he probably didn't see you, man. And as we went round the corner, he was in front going super slow still. And I'm cruising behind, just going, you're good, man. And I just said, no one's out to get you.
Mm,
No
I
one's out to
love
get
that.
you. And even if they are, that's their stuff to work on.
Right.
Right. And I literally I know exactly where I was on the road, having this conversation, like word for word, those pieces. And so I wanted to share that because for those listening, this is an ongoing journey,
Mm,
for all of us. it will never end until it actually ends. And then, we want to squeeze everything that we possibly can into that and continue to get better with each interaction that we have. And what can often happen is that the interactions, especially if we're not conscious about how we're showing up and how we want to maybe show up differently, then we can end up spiraling down into a world of assumption that isn't serving you and isn't serving others. And if we can get that a little bit better, like I got today, which I was like really gave myself a pat on the back in that moment. I'm like, oh, dude, you're improving with this, right? And it's a never ending journey that will occur. And there'll be times where I'll miss it. And it'll be frustrating again in that specific moment. But just continuing to get a little bit better. Yeah, worse a little bit there, but then you get better again is such a great approach to life in general. And especially when it comes to being generous. And you mentioned, it feels good to give. It feels really good to give. There's been a few occasions I thought about when you were sharing where people have reached out, they'll completely remain nameless, where, their kids have been having a challenging time, and where I've just gotten on the phone and had a chat with them. I said, if you want to have a chat, because I went through like 13 to 15, maybe to this day, probably the two of the really most challenging years of my life, to a point where it was not a good situation. And so I know what it's like to go through those challenging situations. And in those conversations, there's nothing to gain. There's nothing that I'm looking for. It's simply to be of service. And each of you have your own certain skill sets that you could be of service with. And maybe it's financially, maybe it's a bit of time, maybe it's a bit of wisdom that you're able to share that could help somebody in some way. And you never know the impact that could have on somebody's life, because as we all know, there's sometimes these small moments that occur that shift the trajectory of our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's hugely powerful.
Yeah. It's been such a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on the show. We have a rapid fire segment coming up here where we go through values, beliefs, and habits. First up, what's your number one value and why?
That generosity is the most powerful lever to make the world a better place. And I think the why is I've seen it. Like, I know it's, yeah.
Yeah, you've witnessed it. It's beautiful. What's a belief that's shaped who you've become, whether it's a belief about yourself, about others, about the world?
I believe that when any of us has that idea, that thought, that moment of something that they think they should be doing, don't doubt yourself and don't give the inner critic too much headspace. Your inner critic can keep you safe, but sometimes just a party kill. And so work it out and believe. And if I can do it, if everything that you've just heard about Impact 100 means anything, your idea is worth it, and it's worth your time and your exploration. So keep listening to that voice no matter what.
So good. Sometimes that little inner critic oversteps the mark a little bit, doesn't it? Again, it's there to keep you safe, but if it just keeps you inside a cave and you're never able to go outside the cave, like at some stage, you're going to get hungry, right? So you've got to get out there and make something happen and create something great. Love that. What's a habit, ritual, or routine that you simply can't live without? Whether it be a daily habit, or it could be out to a weekly, or it could even be an annual tradition that you do with family or friends.
I tell you, there are lots of ways I could answer that, but I would say I recently discovered this amazing meditation. It is at a local place, and it's called Om Meditation and Wellness, and it's called floating meditation. Now, not floating in water, hammocks, silk hammocks, like little cocoons. And there's a sound bath component to it and a guided meditation. And it is, you're in there for an hour and you walk out, or more like you get poured out of the hammock feeling like you've had a massage. Everything feels better. And it is an every Saturday ritual for me. It is just a beautiful way to start the weekend. And it's just been a huge gift in my life. So I would say that would be the habit.
I'm going to have to see if I can find whether there's one around Austin here. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I think that would be incredible. Otherwise, I'll just have to get a hammock in the backyard and get Brittany to run a beautiful meditations that she does, which is amazing. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's so good.
Yeah, you've got an inside expert, but for me, I go to the place.
She is fantastic. We just, like you said, so it's just a normal hammock, or is there a
Yeah, it's like a
specific?
silk, the silk
Yeah,
hammocks. And instead of being on a bar like this, your hammock in your backyard might look like this. It's both ends are up in the ceiling and it comes down like a cocoon and you lie in it and the sides, I'll send you pictures,
please
but
do.
the sides, it's like dark and you feel alone, even though you're in this studio with 15 or 20 other people. It's incredible.
There's a yoga that I did when I was in Denver once, and I did what is aerial yoga, I think it's called.
Right.
Is
So
it the same
probably,
mechanisms? Maybe.
if for this place, they do use the same mechanisms to do aerial yoga.
Yeah.
You are way more fit than I am. I am much better relaxing in the hammock than trying to do yoga in the hammock. I might break something. But yes, odds are it's similar. But I really will. I'll send you a link to the place.
Yeah,
Because
please
it's
do. I'd
awesome.
love to check that out. Well, I'll make sure you put that into the show notes as well. And we'll see the aerial yoga I did. I've got a couple of funny photos, I think, somewhere of me being in some pretty weird positions in there. But, it was a blast. I really enjoyed it. So I love that. That's so good. Hey, where can people go to find out more about it's obviously a big year for Impact 100. How can they get involved, whether they're wanting to become on the donor side for the global level or be involved at a chapter level or anything else? Do you have a book coming out? Any of that stuff that might be helpful for people to find out more with what they've heard so far?
Absolutely. So I would say if they want to go to impact100global.org, the 100 is the number. So impact100global.org. In it, you will find easy ways to understand more about what we do at Global. You can also find a chapter near you. And if you decide you want to start a chapter, the journey begins there. If you're interested in supporting Global financially or in kind, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I would say email me directly, please, at wendy@impact100global.org. I would love to talk to you. I also have a website called wendyhsteele.com where people can hire me to speak. The revenue of that goes to Impact 100 Global. So it's all going in the same direction, even though wendyhsteele.com looks separate. The money all goes together.
Fantastic. Well, I
Yeah.
mentioned we'll have everything mentioned in those show notes. It's so good to see you. Thanks for coming on the
So
show.
good to see you. And the time flew by. So thank you. Thank you for including me. This was super fun. And I'm really glad we had this chance to chat. You're amazing.
Same. I'm very appreciative of you coming on the show and love the conversation. I knew we were going to have an amazing conversation with just the things that we've had conversation about privately and in the past. So thanks again for coming on. And for those of you listening in, we'll have everything that was mentioned in the show notes at cameronatlas.com/podcast. We've got some great new guests coming up. So make sure you hit that follow button, leave a comment. And until next time, go and write the next line in your story. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on The Edge of Possible.